Officer Rick Dalton's flashlight found Emma Hayes hiding under the Roosevelt Bridge in Seattle. She pressed herself against the concrete pillar, hoping he would walk past, but he never did. "Get up," he said, already reaching for the plastic bag where she kept her blanket. Emma stood slowly. Her whole body hurt. 26 years old, and she felt like she was dying. The cough that had started 3 weeks ago now brought up blood every morning. Dalton grabbed her bag and threw it toward the river. "How many times do I have to tell you? This is city property. You can't live here." "I'm not living," Emma said quietly. "I'm just trying not to freeze." He laughed. "That's not my problem. You want a bed? Get a job." "Oh wait, nobody wants to hire trash." Emma turned to leave, but Dalton wasn't done. "Hold on," he said, pointing at the cans she had collected. "What's this?" "Recycling. I was going to cash them in tomorrow." He picked up the bag and dumped it into the gutter. Cans rolled everywhere. "Oops," he said, smiling. Emma watched her week of work disappear. That was $15. Enough for 2 meals and some cough medicine. Now it was gone. Dalton walked away laughing. Emma stood there shaking. She knelt down and started picking up the cans that hadn't fallen into the water. That's when she heard the tires screaming on the bridge above. The sound was wrong. This was panic. Metal grinding, brakes failing, someone losing control. Emma looked up just as a black Range Rover smashed through the guardrail. The truck hung in the air for a moment. Then gravity pulled it down and the Range Rover hit the river with a sound like an explosion. Water shot 15 feet into the air. She watched the truck sink fast, front end already underwater. Through the rear window she saw a man. Big, not moving, head against the steering wheel. On the bridge above there were horns, people screaming. But down here by the river there was only Emma and the sinking truck. Maybe 60 seconds before the man inside drowned. Her brain told her to run. Who was she to save anyone? But her legs moved anyway. She pulled off her jacket and threw it in the mud. Then her shoes. Emma took a deep breath and jumped. The cold hit her like a fist. The river was near freezing. The shock knocked every thought from her head. Her lungs locked up. For 3 terrible seconds she sank, and she thought this was how she died. Then something inside her woke up. Her arms started moving. Her legs kicked. She remembered being 8 years old at the public pool, her mother teaching her to float. Emma kicked hard, fighting the current. The truck was 10 feet away. Then 5. She could see the man through the windshield. Big shoulders, expensive suit, not moving. She reached the driver's side door and pulled the handle. Locked. Her lungs were screaming for air. She looked around desperate and saw a chunk of broken concrete on the river bottom. Emma grabbed it. Heavy. She swung it at the window. The first hit did nothing. The second made cracks. The third shattered the glass completely. Water rushed into the truck. Emma dropped the concrete and squeezed through the broken window. Glass cut her arms, but she didn't feel it. She grabbed his collar. He was twice her weight. But Emma had dragged heavier trash bags through city streets for $5. She would not lose to a river. She kicked, pulled him through the window, and started swimming up. Every movement was agony. Her lungs were about to explode. Then she broke the surface. Air flooded her lungs. She choked and threw up river water, but her hand never let go of the man's collar. She swam toward the bank, and when her knees touched mud she dragged him up onto solid ground and collapsed beside him. Snow kept falling. Emma lay there gasping, her body shaking. She heard sirens in the distance. People were coming. Emma closed her eyes. The flashlight woke her. The voices and footsteps triggered something deep inside her. Police would ask for identification. She didn't have any. They would call Dalton. Emma forced her exhausted body to move. She crawled toward the darkness under the bridge. Inch by inch, she dragged herself into the shadows. She looked back once. The rescue team had reached the man. They were doing chest compressions. She saw his chest rise. He was alive. Something inside her loosened. She had done it. She, a homeless nobody, had saved a life. Emma turned and disappeared into the darkness. She didn't know that above her, a traffic camera had recorded everything. The Range Rover losing control. The crash. A small thin figure throwing herself into the water. The camera recorded her breaking the surface again, dragging a body twice her size. The footage was blurry, but clear enough to show that something impossible had happened. And then she disappeared. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to this channel for more. The ambulance lights tore through the night. The man was loaded onto a stretcher. Nobody knew the man they were saving was Julian Kane, one of the most powerful crime bosses on the West Coast. And nobody knew that the person who pulled him from death was a homeless woman, shivering in the darkness not far away, coughing up blood and praying she would survive the night. But when Julian Kane woke up and learned he was still alive, he would find that video. And he would turn the entire city upside down to find the ghost who saved his life. Julian Kane opened his eyes to a white ceiling. This was the private medical facility his organization kept hidden inside an office building downtown. His head felt like someone was hammering nails into his skull. He tried to sit up but a hand pressed down on his shoulder. "Stay still, boss," said Leo, his right-hand man. "What happened?" Julian asked. Leo's face was pale. The truck was sabotaged. The brake line was cut. Julian closed his eyes. Someone had tried to kill him. Russo? Leo nodded. Julian would deal with Russo later. But right now something else was bothering him. A faint memory. Small hands gripping his collar. His body being dragged through freezing water. Who pulled me out? Leo was quiet for a moment. "That's the strange part," he finally said, taking out a tablet. "We got the traffic camera footage." Julian took the tablet and pressed play. The video quality was terrible, but clear enough. The Range Rover tearing through the guardrail. The crash. And then a figure, small and thin, throwing herself into the water. Julian watched the figure disappear under the surface. 10 seconds passed. 20. 30. Then she came up and she was dragging him with her. She got him to the bank. Collapsed beside him. And when the rescue team got close, she crawled into the darkness and vanished. "Who is she?" Julian asked. "We don't know yet. Probably homeless." Julian touched the screen and froze the frame at the last moment before she disappeared. He stared at the small figure who had risked her life to save a stranger. "Find her," Julian said. "Turn this whole city upside down if you have to. Find her and bring her here." 3 days. That's how long Julian Kane's people searched. They questioned homeless people, drug dealers, workers at convenience stores. Most shook their heads. Some spoke of a girl they sometimes saw under the bridge. Silent. They called her the ghost. Leo was the one who found her. He followed traces to an alley 2 blocks from Roosevelt Bridge. She was there, curled up behind a dumpster, her body shaking. Leo almost walked past without noticing. Then she coughed. A wet, bloody cough. He knelt beside her. She was burning with fever but her body shook with cold. Her breathing was broken. Every breath a battle she was slowly losing. Pneumonia. She was dying right here in this alley. The woman who saved the most powerful crime boss on the West Coast was dying and nobody cared. Leo pulled out his phone and called Julian. Did you find her? Yeah, Leo looked down at the small shaking body. But there's a problem, boss. She's dying. Silence. Then Julian's voice came again. Bring her here now. Call Dr. Park. She can't die. Leo took off his jacket and wrapped it around Emma's thin body. She was light as a child when he lifted her. Hold on, Ghost, he whispered. My boss owes you his life. Emma woke up and didn't know where she was. That scared her. This place was soft and warm and smelled clean. She lay on a huge bed with white sheets. The room was massive. Red curtains, crystal chandelier, paintings on the walls. She tried to sit up but her body refused. There was a tube in her hand. A machine beside the bed beeping steadily. The door opened. The man who entered was tall. Shoulders wide. A face carved from stone with steel-gray eyes. A faint scar ran down his cheek. This was the man she had pulled from the sinking truck. That huge build. That heavy weight as she dragged him through the current. He was alive. And he was standing here looking at her. Julian said nothing for a long moment. Then he stepped forward, pulled a chair to the bedside, and sat down. You're the one who saved me, he said. Emma didn't answer. Why? Julian asked, leaning forward. You didn't know who I was. You jumped into freezing water to save a stranger. Why? Emma looked straight into his eyes. Because you were dying and I was the only one who could do anything. Julian blinked. You didn't know who I was? Should I have known? For the first time she saw something on his face other than coldness. Surprise. I'm Julian Kane. Emma waited for fear to hit her but nothing came. The name meant nothing to her. She had lived under a bridge for 3 years. Hadn't read newspapers. Hadn't watched the news. I don't know who you are, she repeated. And does it matter? Julian leaned back. He was looking at her differently now. Not looking down at her. Not looking through her. But looking directly at her as if she were a real person. You're not afraid of me, he said. I stopped being afraid a long time ago, Emma answered. When you have nothing left to lose, you have nothing left to fear. Julian looked at her for a long time. Then he did something Emma didn't expect. He smiled. Just a slight curve at the corner of his mouth. For the first time, he said softly, someone has looked me in the eye without shaking. Julian stood up and walked to the window. In my world, he began, there are rules nobody is allowed to break. One of those rules is about debt. You saved my life. That's the greatest debt a person can owe. And I don't leave debts unpaid. Before she could speak, the door opened and an older man entered. Gray hair, gold glasses, carrying a black leather bag. This is Dr. Park, Julian said. He'll check your condition. Dr. Park nodded to Emma and began his examination. Checking her pulse, her blood pressure, listening to her lungs. His frown got deeper with each step. When he asked Emma to remove her shirt she hesitated but then agreed. The room fell silent as Dr. Park saw what was on her body. Old scars crossing her back. Cigarette burns on her shoulder. And the long scar on her left arm that she had made herself on the darkest night of her life. Dr. Park didn't ask questions. Julian stood there and Emma felt his eyes on her scars. She waited for disgust. But when she glanced at him she only saw his jaw clenched and his hands curled into fists. Severe malnutrition, Dr. Park reported after Emma dressed. Anemia. A lung infection in a dangerous stage. She needs medical care for at least several weeks. Otherwise she won't survive this winter. Julian nodded. You'll stay here, he told Emma. You'll get medical care, a place to stay, food. In return you won't leave until I allow it. I don't need charity, Emma said. This isn't charity, Julian stepped closer. This is me paying a debt. You saved my life. Now I'm saving yours. Emma wanted to refuse. She didn't trust powerful men. But her body was dying. Her hand moved to her chest where her mother's silver ring still hung on a cheap string. You have to live, her mother had said. No matter what, you have to live. Emma closed her eyes and saw her mother's face. Her mother wanted her to live. Maybe this was her only chance. All right, she opened her eyes. I'll stay. Julian nodded. During the first days in the Kane mansion, Emma felt wrong. The bed was too soft. She was used to cold concrete. So on the first night she pulled the blanket onto the floor and lay in the corner with her back against the wall. Food was another problem. They brought her meals she had never seen. But Emma couldn't finish them. She ate half and hid the rest under her pillow. A habit from the years when she never knew where the next meal would come from. On the third day her door opened and a woman walked in. Long black hair, gray eyes like Julian's but sharper. Wearing an elegant suit. Claire Kane, she introduced herself without warmth. Julian's sister. Emma stood up and said nothing. Claire walked around the room. What do you want from my brother? Claire asked bluntly. I don't want anything. I only want to leave. Claire snorted, not believing her. Everyone wants something. I'll be watching you. And if you do anything to harm my brother, I'll personally bury you where nobody will ever find you. Claire turned and left. Emma watched her go without fear. She only felt tired. That night a scream tore through the Kane mansion. Before the guard could move, Julian was already there. He didn't know why he was awake, why he was walking near her room. But when he heard that scream his feet carried him. He pushed Emma's door open and saw something that made his frozen heart ache. She wasn't in the bed. She was curled in the corner, back pressed to the wall, arms wrapped over her head, and she was screaming. Please don't, she cried. I'm sorry. I'll be good. Please don't hit me anymore. Julian stood there frozen. A man who had killed without blinking didn't know what to do with a woman having a nightmare. But seeing Emma folded in on herself, he couldn't turn away. He stepped closer slowly. Knelt a few steps from her, keeping distance because he knew sometimes touch made things worse. He knew because he had once been like her, when his father was still alive and the man's belt lived in every one of his nightmares. Emma, he said her name, low and steady. Emma, you're here. You're safe. She didn't answer. Her eyes were open but saw nothing. She kept shaking. I don't want this, she moaned, tears sliding down her cheeks. Please let me go. Something burned in Julian's chest. Rage. Someone had done this to her. And he wanted to find that person and tear them apart. You're safe, he repeated, his voice softer. Nobody can touch you here. I won't let anyone hurt you. Slowly Emma's breathing eased. Her shoulders stopped shaking. Her eyes blinked and focused. She looked at Julian and in that moment he saw it. True brokenness. The kind that comes from a soul crushed too many times and somehow still trying to put itself back together. He recognized it because he saw it every day in the mirror. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered. "You don't need to be," Julian said. "We all have ghosts." Emma looked at him. She understood him without words. Understood he carried hidden scars too. "Do you have nightmares too?" she asked softly. Julian didn't answer because he didn't need to. His silence was answer enough. He stood but didn't leave. He pulled the chair close to her corner and sat. "Go to sleep," he said. "I'll be here." Emma watched him for a long moment. Then she closed her eyes and for the first time since arriving she truly slept. Julian stayed there all night, watching her, and wondering why a stranger made him feel less alone than anyone he had ever known. 2 weeks passed. Under Dr. Park's care, Emma's body began to heal. Her pale skin warmed. The bloody coughs stopped. She gained weight. But the greatest change wasn't in her body. It was in her soul. Emma began to read. The Kane Mansion's library was huge. She started with simple novels, then poetry. She read like she was making up for the years she had been denied learning. She also began to talk to the staff. Betty, the elderly cook, was the first to break through Emma's shell. She brought her special meals and told her stories. She simply let Emma know someone cared. "She's genuinely good," Leo told Julian. "I've watched her for 2 weeks. There's nothing suspicious. She just reads and talks with Betty." Julian didn't reply but he knew Leo was right. Emma had no schemes. And maybe that was why he couldn't stop thinking about her. He began to appear in the places she spent time. The library. The garden. The corridor outside her room. He told himself it was about security. But deep down he knew that was a lie. He wanted to be near her. One December night when snow began to fall, Julian found Emma standing on the living room balcony. She was wearing a coat Betty had found for her. She was watching the snowflakes. He stepped beside her without speaking. They stood in silence, shoulders nearly touching. "Thank you," she said after a long while. Julian didn't ask what she was thanking him for. He only nodded. Then she added softly, "Thank you for not asking." Julian understood. She meant thank you for not questioning her past. He simply let her be herself. And sometimes that was the greatest gift one person could give another. They stood there until snow covered their shoulders. 2 figures in a winter night, silent together and not alone. That morning snow covered the garden. Emma stood by the window looking out and felt a strange longing. She wanted to go outside. Dr. Park had allowed her gentle movement. When she asked Leo, he nodded. They would only walk around the garden. That was the first mistake. The garden was wide and silent. Emma walked slowly, breathing in the cold. Leo followed a few steps behind. The first gunshot ripped through the stillness. Leo fell. His blood spreading red across white snow. 4 men appeared from behind the bushes, dressed in black, faces covered, guns aimed at her. They moved forward. Emma stood there, heart racing. She had 2 choices. Give up or fight. She chose to fight. When the lead man moved toward her, Emma ran for Leo. Not to escape but because she knew he had a gun. She dropped beside Leo, slid her hand under his jacket, and pulled the pistol. The lead attacker lunged. Emma twisted and smashed the handle into his temple. He fell. She stood and aimed at the remaining 3. "Back away," she said. "Back away or I'll shoot." The 3 men hesitated. And in that moment, gunfire erupted from the mansion. Julian and his men appeared, and in less than a minute the remaining three lay on the snow. Julian stepped over bodies and stopped in front of Emma. She still stood there, the gun in her hand. Blood splashed across her face. But her eyes were calm. "Leo is hurt," she said evenly. "Call a doctor." Julian looked at her and saw something new. Strength. Will. She wasn't only weak. She was a warrior beaten down by life but never truly surrendered. "Get Dr. Park," Julian ordered. Then he took off his coat and put it over Emma's shoulders. Gently took the gun from her hand. "You're safe now," he said softly. "You did very well." Emma looked at him, and for the first time she let herself lean on someone. She leaned into Julian and he caught her. After the attack, Julian tripled security. Leo survived. But the greatest change was that Julian began coming to Emma's room every night. The first night he said it was to check security. The second night he said it was to make sure she wasn't having nightmares. The third night he said nothing. He simply came and sat in the chair by the window. And they began to talk. One night Emma asked about the scar on his face. Julian was silent for a long time. Then he began to tell her about his father. James Kane, a man whose family lived in terror. He beat his wife. He beat his children. "This scar," Julian touched his cheek, "is from my 14th birthday. I spilled wine on his shirt in front of guests. He waited until they left and then cut my face with his ring." Emma listened without speaking. "My mother endured 18 years, Julian continued. Then one day she couldn't anymore. She waited until I was at school, until Claire was at school. Then she swallowed a whole bottle of sleeping pills. I was 16 when I found her. She looked like she was sleeping, but she was cold." The room fell silent. Emma didn't know what to say. So she didn't speak. She rose from the bed, went to where Julian sat, and sat on the floor beside his feet. "We're the same," she said softly. "We were raised by pain. We carry scars nobody sees. We're so lonely we don't even know how not to be lonely anymore." Julian looked down at her. In the dark he saw her more clearly than ever. He saw a broken soul like his own. He didn't know what he was doing when his hand reached out, searching for hers. And she didn't pull away when his fingers touched hers. They sat there in silence, hand in hand, two broken souls touching for the first time. And in that moment both Julian and Emma felt a little less alone. Claire Kane changed her attitude toward Emma after the attack. So when Claire offered to take Emma shopping, Julian agreed on the condition that guards accompany them. They went to an expensive store downtown. They had just stepped out carrying their bags when a man blocked their path. Dalton stood there in a police uniform, a fake smile on his lips. Emma recognized him instantly and her blood seemed to freeze. "Miss," Dalton said with fake concern. "I'm Officer Rick Dalton. I've been worried about you. Are you all right?" Emma froze as memories crashed back. His boot crushing her cans. His hateful voice calling her trash. Claire stepped forward, placing herself between Emma and Dalton. "Officer Dalton," she said with hate. "I know you. You're the corrupt cop who hurts the homeless. Don't perform for me." Dalton's face shifted but he recovered. "I only want to make sure this girl isn't being held against her will." Claire took out her phone. "Touch her and I'll call my brother. And you know what Julian Kane does to anyone who touches what's his." Dalton looked at Claire, then at the approaching guards, and knew he had lost. He stepped back, but before turning away he looked at Emma with poison in his eyes. "We'll meet again," he whispered. "And next time nobody will be there to protect you." Claire pulled Emma away and called Julian. When they reached the mansion, Julian was already waiting, his face carved from stone, gray eyes burning with anger. "I want everything on him," Julian said. "Everything he's done, everyone he's connected to. And I want to know if he's tied to Russo." Leo nodded. But the investigation didn't stop with Dalton. Julian also ordered a background search on Emma. Not because he doubted her but because he wanted to know who had hurt her so he could take revenge. The report came 2 days later. Julian read about Emma's mother dying of cancer. About her stepfather abusing her. About the trafficking ring that kidnapped her and held her for 8 months before she escaped. And about the baby. The baby she carried after the rape and lost because her body was too broken. Julian finished the report and sat still for a long time. His hands clenched so tightly his nails cut into his palms and bled. Then he stood and went to the window. "Find her stepfather," he said. "And find the traffickers who held her. I don't care where they are. Find them." On Christmas Eve the Kane mansion glowed with lights. Claire had organized a small gathering with only the closest people. Leo, Dr. Park, Betty, and a few guards. No outside guests. Only family. Emma stood in a corner, shy in the deep blue dress Claire had chosen for her. She had never attended a party like this. But tonight for the first time in many years she felt part of something. When the evening ended and gifts were exchanged, Julian stood and walked to her. The room grew quiet. "I have something for you," he said and took a small black box from his pocket. Emma's heart raced as she opened it. A white gold chain, delicate and elegant, with a perfectly made clasp meant to hold a ring. Her mother's ring. "The old string is about to break," Julian said. "I thought you might need a new one to keep it safe." Emma looked at the necklace, then at Julian, and something inside her finally gave way. Tears slid down her cheeks. The first tears not of suffering but of being seen. Nobody had ever given her anything. Nobody had ever noticed the small things that mattered to her. But Julian had seen. Julian had cared. She didn't know what she was doing until she had already done it. She stepped forward, rose on her toes, and kissed him. Julian froze for a moment. Then his hand slipped around her waist, drew her closer, and he kissed her back. Not softly now but with hunger. The room fell away. The world narrowed to two people holding each other under Christmas lights. Two broken souls finally finding one another. When they parted, Emma still shook in his arms and Julian looked at her with eyes completely changed. No longer cold. Only a gentleness meant for her alone. And from that night on everything between them was different. 1 week after Christmas the storm came. Frank Russo had waited long enough. It began at 3 in the morning when a bomb exploded at Julian's main warehouse. 15 minutes later a second bomb went off at Julian's nightclub. Then a third. Russo wanted to burn everything. Julian was woken by reports flooding in. He ran from his room shouting orders. And in the chaos nobody noticed the mansion system had been broken into. Dalton had done his work. With Russo's help he had bribed one guard and gotten the code to turn off cameras. While Julian and Leo rushed out, Dalton slipped in. Emma was asleep when her door flew open. She barely had time to open her eyes before a rough hand covered her mouth and the sick familiar smell of cigarettes filled her nose. Dalton grinned in the dark. "Miss me?" he whispered. "I told you we'd meet again." Emma struggled but he was stronger. A blow to the side of her head and her world went dark. When she woke she was in an abandoned warehouse. Gray concrete walls, a bare bulb swinging above. She was tied to a wooden chair. Dalton stood before her holding the same stick he had once used to threaten her. "You know," Dalton said, "I was angry when you vanished. But then you went and became Kane's woman." He spat at her feet. The first blow drove the air from her lungs. The second split her lip. The third and fourth came with hissing insults, calling her trash. Emma didn't scream. She closed her eyes and went somewhere they couldn't touch. Dalton stopped, breathing hard. "Why aren't you crying?" he shouted. "Why aren't you begging?" Emma opened her eyes, pale green, bruised and swollen, but frighteningly calm. She looked straight at him and said roughly, "You'll be dead before sunrise." Dalton laughed. "You're crazy." Emma didn't answer because she didn't need to. She knew Julian would come. Julian returned from the explosions to find the real nightmare. Emma's room empty, window open, and on her pillow a note saying, "If you want your woman back, come find me." Julian read it and something in him broke. Not in weakness but like a beast freed from chains. Leo arrived wounded and pale at Julian's expression. "Boss," he said carefully. Julian only looked at him with eyes that had become bottomless black and spoke 3 words. "Find her now." Julian lifted Emma into his arms gently. She was thinner than he remembered, smaller, and when he felt her weight, felt her weak breath against his chest, something inside him finally broke. The most feared crime boss on the West Coast stood in the blood-covered warehouse and cried. Tears ran down his face, falling into Emma's tangled hair. It was the first time he had cried since finding his mother 20 years ago. And now a thin homeless woman had broken every wall he had built and reminded him he was still human. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't protect you." Emma lifted her bruised hand and pressed it gently to his lips. "You came," she said roughly but warmly. "That's all that matters. Take me home." Julian nodded and carried her out where Leo waited. He didn't let her go the entire ride back. She rested against his chest and though her body hurt she felt safer than she ever had. Dr. Park was waiting. He went pale at Emma's condition but quickly began working. Fixing wounds, wrapping bruises. Fortunately Dalton hadn't caused permanent damage. Only pain. And pain would heal. "She needs rest," Dr. Park told Julian. "At least a few weeks. And she needs someone with her. She may have nightmares." Julian nodded. "I'll be here." In the days that followed he never left her room. He slept in the chair beside her bed, woke whenever she moved, held her hand when nightmares came. He fed her when she was too weak. He read to her when she couldn't sleep. Leo ran operations. Claire managed finances. But Julian didn't care because for the first time in his life he had something more important than power. He had her. In the weeks that followed justice was delivered. Dalton was arrested in the hospital. Evidence of corruption, kidnapping, and assault was sent to the FBI and the press. He lost his badge, his pension, his freedom. In prison rumors about his abuse of homeless women spread and Dalton quickly learned there were places worse than death. Russo met a similar end. His attack exposed him and Julian struck back. Within a month all of Russo's businesses were shut down. And Russo himself was found in a cheap motel with a bullet in his head. But Julian didn't stop with those who had directly hurt Emma. He went after the ghosts of her past. Her stepfather was living a quiet life in Arizona. He thought he had escaped. He was wrong. Julian hired investigators to gather evidence. Tracked down other victims. And sent everything to local police and the media. The scandal exploded. Her stepfather was arrested in front of his family, exposed on national television. The traffickers didn't escape either. Julian used his network to hunt them down. And when he found them he sent the information to the FBI. The trafficking ring was taken apart. Dozens of victims were rescued. Emma knew what Julian had done. He didn't hide it. She sat quietly as he told her. And when he asked how she felt, she was silent before answering. "I don't forgive them," she said calmly but firmly. "I never will." Then she looked at him, and in her green eyes was something new. Peace. "But I let go. I don't let them live in my mind anymore. They already took enough from me." From that day on, Emma began to change. She asked Julian if she could study. She studied hard. And when Claire asked what she wanted to do afterward, her answer surprised them. "I want to study psychology," Emma said. "I want to help people like me. People who've been hurt, abused, forgotten. I want them to know they're not alone, that they can survive, that there's always hope." Julian looked at her and saw not the ghost he had pulled from the river, but a strong, bright woman shining from within. She had turned her pain into purpose. And he had never loved her more. 6 months after that terrible night, on a warm spring afternoon, Julian took Emma to Roosevelt Bridge. They stood on the bridge looking down at the river below, the same river that had witnessed the moment that changed both their lives. The water shimmered in the spring sunlight, gentle and peaceful. "It's hard to believe it's the same river," Emma said softly. "That night it wanted to kill me. Now it looks like it could never hurt anyone." Julian stood beside her, staring down at the surface. Remembering the drowning, the darkness, the cold. Remembering the small hand that had grabbed his collar and pulled him toward the light. "You saved me," he said, turning to her. "Not just that night in the river, but every day after. You saved me from loneliness, from darkness, from myself." Emma looked at him, and in her green eyes, once faded, a new light now shone. "That night," she said slowly, "I thought I'd die. I jumped because I had nothing left to lose. I wasn't afraid of dying. I even wanted to die a little." Then she turned back to him, and her smile was beautiful. "But now I want to live. For the first time in many years I really want to live. Because I have you. Because I have a family." Julian felt his heart race. He took a small black box from his pocket. Emma looked at the box, then at him, eyes wide. Julian went down on one knee right there on the bridge where everything began and opened the box. Inside was a diamond ring. "I don't know how to propose," he said. "I've never loved anyone before you. But you jumped into that freezing river to save a stranger. And since then you've saved my soul every day. I want to spend the rest of my life repaying that debt. Emma Hayes, will you be my wife?" Tears ran down Emma's cheeks, but she was smiling. She nodded, unable to speak. And Julian stood, slipped the ring onto her finger, and held her like he'd never let go. The wedding took place a month later. Small and close, with only the nearest people. Claire stood beside Emma, smiling. Leo stood beside Julian. Dr. Park stood in the front row. Betty cried in the back. Emma wore a simple white dress. On her chest her mother's silver ring still rested on the white gold chain Julian had given her at Christmas. "I have nothing to give you but myself," she said in her vows. "A girl from under a bridge with too many scars. But you showed me that it's enough, that I am enough. I'll love you every day from now until forever." Julian held her hands and spoke his vows. "You jumped into a freezing river to save a stranger. You didn't know who I was and you still saved me. That's when I knew you were the best person I'd ever met. I'll spend my life being worthy of you." They kissed and the room clapped. And Emma thought of her mother, of the ring on her chest, and whispered silently, "I found my family, Mom." 1 year after the wedding, Emma Kane sat in a university lecture hall taking notes during a lecture on trauma psychology. She was the oldest student but also the most hardworking. Alongside her studies, Emma and Julian founded the Bridge of Hope Foundation, named after Roosevelt Bridge where their story began. The foundation provided temporary housing, food, medical care, and job training for homeless people. In its first year they helped more than 200 people. One evening Emma's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but Officer Dalton used to hurt me too. I heard about what you did, about your foundation, about Dalton being arrested. I want to thank you. You saved more people than you realize." Emma read the message and felt something warm spread through her chest. She replied, "I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who was saved and wanted to do the same." The final message made her eyes sting. That's exactly what heroes do. That night Emma stood on the mansion balcony looking at the city lights. The spring wind brushed her hair and she placed her hand on her belly where a new life was growing. Julian stepped out and stood beside her. "Julian," she said softly. "What is it?" "I have something to tell you." Emma took his hand and placed it on her belly. Julian froze. Then his gray eyes widened. "We're going to have a baby," Emma said with a bright smile. Julian couldn't speak. He only pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. And for the second time in his life Julian Kane cried. Not from pain but from happiness, from gratitude, from finally having everything he had never dared to dream of. They stood there beneath the star-filled night. Two broken souls who had found each other and healed together. It had all begun with a snowy night, a truck falling into a river, and a woman who decided saving a stranger's life was worth more than her own safety. Some debts can never truly be repaid, but they can be honored every day with love and staying together until the end of life. This story teaches us that nobody in this world is worthless. No matter where you are, no matter what you've been through, you can still become a miracle in someone else's life. And sometimes the most wounded people are the ones who heal others the most. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are watching from.